9/11. One of, if not the most controversial things that ever happened in United States history. A moment in history filled with conspiracies, accusations, and of course, patriotism. Okay, so this is how it's gonna work, top tier. I will explain the basics of what happened, just in case some people somehow don't know. Then later on, our theories and events that actually happened. Also stay till the end, because the last one will have you sleeping with your eyes open.
Yeah, we got it, bro. Hurry up.
I ain't talking to you, man. I'm speaking to the viewers, god damn it. Let's get into it. North and South buildings. These weren't just two regular skyscrapers, they were the very symbol of American financial power, reaching over a quarter mile into the sky. The attacks were synchronized to maximize damage and psychological terror. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 slammed into the North Tower. The impact severed utility lines and trapped hundreds of people on the floors above, but the real shock came just 17 minutes later. United Airlines Flight 175 hit the South Tower. This immediate second strike proved the event wasn't an accident, it was a coordinated act of war. Flight 93. While the North and South Towers were the site of devastating impacts, Flight 93 is where the narrative shifts from coordinated attack to heroic resistance. This Boeing 757 took off late from Newark, New Jersey, destined for San Francisco. Its delay meant the passengers were still airborne when the other three planes hit their targets. This time, difference proved critical. Through cell phones, passengers learned the horrifying truth that their flight wasn't just being hijacked, it was being turned into a missile. The struggle was brief and violent. The hijackers, realizing they were losing control, deliberately crashed the plane upside down into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. While all 44 people on board were killed, their sacrifice prevented the plane from hitting its likely target in Washington, D.C., saving countless lives and protecting a cornerstone of American democracy. Pat Tillman. Tillman was an NFL safety for the Arizona Cardinals, a talented player who, in the aftermath of 9/11, famously turned down a multi-million-dollar contract to enlist in the U.S. Army Rangers. He walked away from fame and fortune to serve his country. His decision instantly made him a national icon and the ultimate poster child for sacrifice during the War on Terror. But here's where things get interesting. On April 22, 2004, while serving in Afghanistan, Tillman was sadly killed. Initially, the military and media hailed his death as a heroic action in a firefight against enemy forces. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star. However, the truth was far messier. A month later, the Pentagon was forced to reveal that Tillman was killed by friendly fire shot by his own platoon in a chaotic incident. Internal investigations revealed that high-level Army brass knew the truth almost immediately and actively worked to conceal the facts from the family and the public for weeks, destroying evidence and misleading investigators to protect the simple, propaganda-friendly image of the football star turned warrior.
So the government lies, like they always do.
Yeah, basically, nothing to be surprised about here. War on Terror. The immediate global reaction to 9/11 was the War on Terror, a massive, open-ended military campaign that reshaped global politics. This wasn't a fight against a nation, it was a seemingly endless conflict against terrorism itself, wherever it might hide. But this is a different story here too. The invasion of Iraq was really a long-planned geopolitical move, conveniently launched under the cover of 9/11 revenge. Were the decision-makers truly driven by an imminent threat, or were they motivated by something more calculated? Many analysts point to oil reserves and the desire for regional dominance, a push to secure energy infrastructure and weaken political rivals in the Middle East. It was a demonstration project, a way to show the world that after 9/11 the US military could and would reshape entire nations at will. The Pentagon. Remember how 3 planes hit their intended targets? The third one was American Airlines Flight 77, which struck the headquarters of the US military, the Pentagon. This was an attack not just on finance, but on the very command center of national defense. At 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 slammed into the Pentagon's western side, instantly killing 189 people. Officially, the plane was piloted by the hijackers on a difficult near-ground level trajectory. The crash caused a partial collapse of the building and ignited massive fires, but the theories around this say otherwise. First, there is the physical evidence. Many argue that the initial hole in the reinforced concrete wall looked far smaller than the wingspan of a Boeing 757, leading some to question if a plane actually hit it, or if it was a smaller, faster military missile. Second, there's the issue of missing debris. Unlike the massive wreckage and identifiable sections seen in New York, Critics argue there was a striking lack of large, recognizable plane parts in the immediate aftermath photos, but the biggest controversy surrounds the surveillance footage. The Pentagon is one of the most surveilled buildings on the planet, yet the government only quickly released a few short, grainy video clips showing a mere flash of fire. Many demanded the release of the dozens of other security tapes that must have captured the event from different angles, suggesting the footage was deliberately withheld because it contradicted the official story. World Trade Center 7, or WTC 7. The story, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is straightforward. It was the collateral damage that did it. Debris from the collapse of the nearby North Tower sparked fires on multiple floors of WTC 7. These fires, though they might not have looked huge from the outside, burned hot for hours, causing several key steel support columns to heat up, buckle, and fail. But the conspiracy side of it doesn't seem to be a far reach, though. You've got a 47-story building that, for the first time in history, falls perfectly symmetrically due to fire. And it fell, let's be honest, at near freefall speed for several seconds, a clear signature of controlled demolition, where all the lower supports are removed simultaneously. USA Patriot Act. The 9/11 attacks exposed glaring gaps in our intelligence and law enforcement framework. The official line is that before 2001, it was actually easier to track a drug dealer's phone calls than a terrorist's. Bureaucracy and legal silos prevented the FBI and the CIA from effectively sharing information, connecting the dots. The Patriot Act was the necessary temporary fix. It was designed to modernize the law for the digital age, allow for roving wiretaps, permit sneak and peek searches, and most importantly, empower federal agencies to share data to thwart future attacks. But there's a darker side for this law. The Patriot Act wasn't a temporary fix to 9/11. It was a wish list the intelligence community had been waiting years to get past. It had nothing to do with preventing terrorism and everything to do with mass surveillance of American citizens. Suddenly, the FBI didn't need probable cause for a warrant. They just needed to certify that your library records or internet history were relevant to an investigation. And under Section 215, they started collecting the phone records of literally millions of innocent people, a program we only found out about thanks to Edward Snowden 12 years later. It didn't make us safer, it just made the government bigger and the Fourth Amendment smaller. Firefighter testimonies. This is where the official story starts to look thin. We're talking about the testimonies of the guys who were actually inside the towers, the firefighters, and their words suggest something way more sinister than a few raging office fires. Let's look at the transcripts. Hundreds of first responders, firemen, police, EMS gave oral histories in the days and weeks afterward, and a shocking number of them describe hearing or seeing things that simply do not match an uncontrolled collapse. I mean, veterans explicitly use words like bombs, Omicron, secondary devices, or saw flashes of light going off in the lower floors and the sub-levels before the towers started to fall. How does a plane at the 90th floor cause explosions in the basement? It doesn't. Others describe a series of rapid rhythmic booms, sequential blasts, that sound exactly like the cutter charges used in a controlled demolition, going off floor by floor down the building. Not the random crack of structural failure, but a deliberate sequence. The argument is simple. These guys are highly trained professionals. They know the difference between a loud fire and a controlled blast, and their statements, which the official investigations basically swept under the rug, suggest the possibility of something far more coordinated than two planes. It's a huge, terrifying detail buried right there in the official record. Explosions. You get the idea. People said they heard and saw explosions type shit. This one focuses on Muhammad Atta's passport. It was found days after the attack by a civilian near the World Trade Center wreckage. The official explanation from the FBI, it was simply blown out of the aircraft before impact or shortly after, caught an updraft and drifted down to the street below, landing several blocks away. It survived the initial fire and the subsequent collapse because it was never inside the building when it fell. Let's just stop and think about this for a second. We've got two massive planes slamming into skyscrapers, generating temperatures hot enough to melt steel, and then the entire structure collapses, turning everything into dust. We're told that the passengers, the planes, the black boxes, they were all basically vaporized. But one of the hijackers' flimsy paper-filled passports that somehow survives this catastrophic inferno, escapes the gravity of the 110-story collapse, and drifts down to land intact on a street a few blocks away. Seriously? Jews did 9/11. The theory alleges that certain Israeli intelligence factions saw 9/11 not as a tragedy, but as a historic opportunity. Their primary strategic goal for decades has been securing stability in a hostile region, and that means neutralizing their neighbors. What did 9/11 instantly achieve? It got the United States military, the biggest, baddest army on the planet, to commit to decades of war and regime change right on Israel's doorstep. Suddenly, the US was dismantling Israel's chief strategic rivals, Iraq, Libya, and later attempts against Syria and Iran. The heavy lifting was being done by someone else. This is the part of the story that the mainstream media completely buried. We're talking about the massive dragnet of hundreds of young, alleged Israeli art students who were reportedly picked up by the FBI before 9/11 and immediately afterward. Their pattern was bizarre. They were caught attempting to gain access to or openly surveil dozens of sensitive U.S. federal and government facilities, including DEA offices, military bases, and even the homes of FBI agents. These weren't tourists, they were using fake names and had sophisticated gear. The official story, when it was finally addressed, was a generic statement about a visa investigation, but reports from DEA and FBI internal memos strongly suggested they were conducting aggressive, wide-ranging intelligence gathering. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy on the internet, I guess. $2 trillion missing. Let's talk about timing, because sometimes timing is everything. Just one day before 9/11 on September 10, 2001, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld made a striking public admission. The Pentagon couldn't account for $2.3 trillion in transactions. Trillion with a T. That's more money than some entire countries are worth. But here's the unbelievable, too convenient detail. Flight 77. The plane that allegedly hit the Pentagon slammed directly into the newly renovated Wedge 1 section. And what was housed in Wedge 1? The offices responsible for the Army's audit and accounting, the destruction of those documents, plus the chaos and immediate priority shift to the war on terror, effectively killed the investigation into the missing money. They got the budget fraud story out on Monday, and by Tuesday the story was literally incinerated. Dancing Israelis. Dancing Israelis. 5 Israeli men were arrested in New Jersey, filming the towers burning and celebrating. They claimed to be tourists, but they were later revealed to be employees of a moving company that the FBI confirmed was a front for Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. They were detained for months and then quietly deported back to Israel. The official explanation? They were simply celebrating the downfall of America's enemies, but to the conspiracy theorists, they had foreknowledge. They were there to document the event. Their presence, combined with the massive geopolitical shift that directly benefited Israel's security goals, suggests that this wasn't just a happy coincidence for one nation. It was the calculated outcome of a plan, but I guess we will never find out the truth. Stocks shorted prior to September 11th. The official investigation, specifically the 9/11 Commission report and various SEC inquiries, acknowledged the abnormal trading activity. They looked into the massive volume of put options, which is a financial bet that a stock price will crash placed on companies directly affected by the attacks. They saw huge bets against United Airlines and American Airlines, the two airlines involved, as well as major insurance companies like Marsh and McLennan and financial firms housed in the World Trade Center. They called it an unsolved coincidence. Unsolved coincidence is the corporate way of saying, we know it looks bad, but we stopped digging. This isn't just a few savvy investors getting lucky, the numbers are astronomical and perfectly targeted. In the days before 9/11, the volume of put options on United Airlines was 30 times higher than its normal rate. For American Airlines, it was 25 times higher. These bets would only pay off if the stocks were absolutely decimated, which is exactly what happened when the planes hit. The question isn't whether the trading was unusual, it was why the identity of the person or group who made millions on the death of thousands has never been conclusively revealed. They followed the paper trail just far enough to call it a mystery, and then they stopped. News reporting minutes prior. Let's talk about the major networks. On the afternoon of September 11th, several news anchors on major networks, most famously the BBC and Fox News, reported live on air that the 47-story WTC-7 building had already collapsed. The BBC reporter was standing live in front of the wreckage talking about WTC-7 falling, and the building was clearly visible and still standing directly over her shoulder. It was over 20 minutes before the building actually went down. Many questions to ask here, not gonna lie. For years before 9/11, a group of influential neoconservatives were publicly arguing that the U.S. couldn't achieve its foreign policy goals in the Middle East without a catastrophic catalyst. The phrase itself comes from a 2000 document titled Rebuilding America's Defenses, published by the think tank The Project for the New American Century. This group included future high-ranking Bush administration officials like Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and Paul Wolfowitz. They were advocating for a massive increase in defense spending and the need for regime change in Iraq and elsewhere, but they explicitly stated that this transformation would be slow, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. Think about that timing. They publish a document saying we need a new Pearl Harbor in 2000. Less than a year later, we get exactly that. This isn't just dark poetry. To the skeptics, it's a blueprint. But guys, again, it's all just a theory at the end of the day. And yeah, lame ass video, not gonna lie. But next one's finna be heat on my mama. And as always, I love you.